Welcome to another episode of Stop Doing Stupid Stuff podcast with your hosts Tim Keefe from Transform CX and Andreas Wieman. Today, we're diving into a compelling article by Sophie Caldwell from CNBC Make It titled American Workers Are Stuck in an Infinite Workday. According to Microsoft report, people are feeling very burnt out. This Microsoft research reveals some striking statistics. Workers are interrupted every 2 minutes, receive over 270 messages daily, and 80% feel they lack sufficient time and energy for their actual work. But as Tim and Andreas will discuss, this isn't exactly breaking news to anyone who's been paying attention to workplace dysfunction. Join us as we explore why outdated work models persist in our digital age, examine the real cost of meeting overload, and discuss what leaders can actually do to create more sustainable, engaging work environments. As always, our hosts bring their signature blend of practical insights and, well, let's call it direct feedback on workplace practices that simply need to stop. Let's get started.
Hi, everybody. This is Tim Keefe from Transform CX and my co-conspirator and co-author, Mr. Andreas Wieman. And we are here to talk about, well, what are we here to talk about? That's a great question. So, Mr. Andreas, you want to kick off the topic for the day?
Nope, only if you pay $5 to subscribe to our channel. And I'm kidding. Um, it's actually a pretty good article that I think is going to relate to a lot of people. So it's a great article by Sophie Caldwell from CNBC. It's American workers are stuck in an infinite workday, according to Microsoft report. People are feeling very burnt out. That is news to me. I don't think I've seen that in practice. There's not like a Gallup global workplace study for 2025 that says, yeah, people are really burnt out and feeling disengaged. And, I don't know. It's kind of news to me. So I don't even know what to talk about here. It's not like we've had a year's worth of podcasts, talking about this exact subject. So I don't know. What do you think?
Well, no. Well, first off, I think it's great when we see data or research from companies like Microsoft, and that's what Sophie's calling out in this article here, and authors like Sophie who are continuing to pound the drum. Because let's face it, I think the challenge is this concept of noise in the system. And, and this is not a new problem. I think as soon as the email started becoming part of the workday, you went to the fact that, oh, I have a corporate email account. Do I log into it after hours or not? And then, oh, you start doing that. Then I start responding to emails, in the evening or early, or I'm in the gym and, and I'm kind of going ahead. Go ahead.
If you think about that, though, right, it's like, so when email came out, and I wouldn't say everybody can debate me on the actual date of email creation. What I'm talking about is corporate, adoption of email. So let's say like the late 80s, but you started seeing personal computers get introduced into the homes, around that same time frame, around the early mid 90s, right? So you had that adoption with AOL. I hear the voice in my head right now of AOL. But as you start getting what is considered mobility today, look at the access that humans have to being able to simply just check an email. Oh, now here's Messenger, here's AOL Messenger. Let me do that, whether it's personal or business. It's the same kind of circumstances around, and enablement of that to occur has increased over the past couple decades. And I think to your point, and this is where I think in the article is Sophie did a good job bringing in the right viewpoints and adding her own viewpoints in there of where do you consider and where's the self-discipline that says, no, I'm walking down a street right now, like the conversation we were just having, walking down a street right now, I'm by myself. Why not? Let me get my iPhone out. Let me look at email and see if anything's going on at work right now. Or, personal, let me get on Instagram and see what's going on right now. See what my favorite celebrity short is or whatever it is. When do you say, no, I'm just going to keep my phone in my pocket. I'm going to keep walking and just be observant. I'm going to look around. I'm going to smell what's hopefully good smells around walking in if you're in the city. Just making those observations. Like, how do you get to that self-discipline standpoint to start right there? And that sounds pretty easy. And it could be easy and everybody has the autonomy to do that. But then how do you micro step that direction out? I think that could be, a starting point for how do you get disciplined enough to get out of this infinite work loop.
Well, well, it's kind of interesting. I think that one of the big problems is with the advent of smartphones, it just became, everybody had access to anything in the palm of their hand. So that's, kind of accelerated all that. But kind of going back and you just say, okay, let's just talk about the work environment. I can't deal with people's Instagram behaviors or whatever. That's beyond my capability. But, I did a project in Latin America a couple of years ago in Brazil, and big corporation. And there, the labor laws are pretty specific about, whether you're an exempt or non-exempt employee. Otherwise, if you're salaried versus hourly, and what are the rules around things like answering email outside of your work hours. And what they would do is they would literally lock people out. If you were a non-exempt employee, in other words, hourly or subject to our hourly labor laws, you could not access your corporate accounts before the start of your scheduled shift, whatever that might be. And even at your lunch break, they would lock you out. And then the other thing they did at 6 p.m., they start turning the lights out in the building to force people to leave the office. So now they're doing it primarily because the labor laws kind of force their hand. Now, you could argue that there's probably two sides of that. There are really good people and good executives there saying we don't want our hourly employees working outside of their normal hours. But you could also see on the other side that probably the salaried, the managers and et cetera, are getting bombarded 7 by 24. And that's what's happening. And so then as a result, people burn out because they're dealing with all what I would consider noise, right? All these micro transactions. And meanwhile, the big things that, and most organizations struggle with getting, like the big projects, the clients, things like closing a deal, bringing a new client on board, making sure that we're delivering the services to that client. Somehow that becomes secondary to, like, oh, we got to have a town hall today. And that's going to take, 3 hours of everybody, whether they're in the time zone or not, having to log in or be in the room or whatever. And you're like, really? Is that really how we need to be doing it? And William Covey, I know I'm really dating myself now, wrote a book on 7 Habits of Effective People many, many years ago. But, one of the big things in there was the concept of prioritizing the stuff in your day, and those priorities are built not just on work, but also personal. And then you fit in the other stuff around it as best you can. But it's getting the big things, the important things, allocated first. And then the other thing I would argue is that people love the noise when they're quiet quitting. You and I have talked about this in the past, where you're working with these clients and you go, okay, we have our daily or weekly team meeting, and you log in and there's 45 people logged into the call and 3 people talk. And it's all status. There's no real interaction. There's no discussion about, oh, which one should we do first, or decision making or input. It's just, this is the list of, whatever, deals in progress, here's
Well,
the status or whatever. And you're like, why
and
do we have this meeting?
well, in
Go
a lot
ahead.
of people's defense, though, there's absolutely zero electronic modern tools that, track status of what people do all the time.
You-
Ideal
you-
pipelines and and pertinent data points. There's
Uh,
no, if someone would come up with a company,
are you
like
being sarcastic?
let's just think about like if you're making sales, for example, right? Everybody's getting real forceful in making sales right now. If there was a company that made a software that tracked all that stuff, that executives or whoever could log in and look at what
God,
status is, I don't know. Maybe we should do that one day. I don't know.
maybe. Yeah, I
But
think
then
sales
we would lose all
Benioff
the
did a pretty
fun.
good job.
We would lose all the great meetings where we're reading, status updates. Obviously, I'm being super sarcastic and jerky about this, but I think you're absolutely right. It's prioritization, but I think where people have a hard time doing prioritization, like defining prioritization, because they're not outcomes driven.
Well,
Organizations are not outcomes driven, or even worse, they're emotional outcome driven. And so it's more about, hey, look at, and I'm not going to name names when I say this, go look at the stock market for this past week here, and AI adoption and AI, what's the right term? AI planning
utilization.
for the
Oh,
future,
yeah.
right? There's been a lot of companies who could be doing so much better that all took pretty big, substantial hits to their market caps and their average stock price this week, because investors are just like, yeah, your AI plans are crap, basically. And so you have all of the mechanisms in place to say, okay, we need to placate to shareholders. We got to placate to analysts, so that way they write rosy reviews about us and people are more inclined to invest in our company. Like, no, how about you just do this? If you have a really good AI, it's going to help you be more efficient. You're going to have better employee outcomes that are going to get transferred over to your client experience and client outcomes there. It's all measurable numerically and objectively. Nobody's reporting on it like that. And I think
Well,
we're in this big space where
yeah.
people are, yeah, let's have a town hall, Tim. We're big executives. Let's have a town hall. That'll pump everybody up. You pump everybody, you have your town hall, you miss all of the things that are should be at the top of the priority list to your point, and then you come back a quarter later for the next town hall and plan, all right, well, the last town hall was great, but you know what? The people just didn't do their side of it. We got to do a better town hall this time, Tim. Rather than sitting back and looking at, are we the bad, what's that meme? Are we the baddies? Are we the bad guys?
Well, and that I think sometimes gets lost, which is, the whatever. And I think there's some ego involved, right? It's like I'm a big shot. I'm a director or vice president, take your pick of titles. And when I have a meeting, I want a lot of people on that meeting because that makes me feel important. But then you realize that first off, if the people aren't in the room, they're multitasking. And even if they are in the room, they're multitasking, right? I mean, we've all seen that, 8 people sitting around a conference table and they're all doing 5 other things and not even listening to why they're there. So that calls into question, why spend time doing that? But I think the article, what's important about the article, I think is, first off, we need to own, we as leaders and organizations need to own the fact how we treat our staff and what we expect from them. And I know there's some very important executives out there who are saying work-life balance is BS. This is not my responsibility. That's your job. You got to manage your work-life balance. And I'm like, oh, okay. But that same poor employee that says, okay, I'm not going to take or process any emails after 6 p.m. until 8 a.m. in the morning because that's my time. They, is management going to support them in that? Or is it going
Right.
to be like, well, I sent you an email at 9 o'clock last night because I needed a response on that proposal and you didn't respond. And, I'm going to ping you again at 4 o'clock in the morning because, oh, by the way, I work on the East Coast hours and that's 8 a.m. for me. And, you're in Hawaii or whatever. And so too bad, not my problem. And yes, it is your problem, Mr. Manager, Mr. Leader, Mr. Business Owner, because guess what? That goes all the way back to the Gallup poll because now you got disengaged employees because they don't think you care, so they don't care. Oh,
Yeah.
wait a minute. What do you mean disengaged? What does that mean? Well,
Well,
like I keep saying, oh, go ahead.
what was the biggest drawback from that too? I shouldn't say drawback, the biggest finding was management disengagement, middle management disengagement. So people are surprised that, yeah, why is our attrition so bad? Why is productivity down? We have all these great AI tools and, we're working at home. People can work at home and be really comfortable, but no, it's not happening. So now we got to go back to the office, because that's where, before, 2020, 2020, everybody was in the office and it was really good. It was sunshine and rainbows. So I don't think any people, there are some, but I don't think the majority are nefarious thinking or think, yeah, I want to do this because I want to do it because I can. I think they're thinking it's the right thing to do. They're just not measuring it the right way and they're not prioritizing or putting modernized analysis on what are the things going on today? What are the circumstances going on today? And just like we opened this podcast with of the evolution of being able to be easier to get to by your employees, your employer, I should say. And it's the evolution of smart devices and where it came from and not having a tower PC, at home that you'd play AOL with or gaming with, like I did in Quake in 95. But no, it's having, oh, I have a laptop now. I got a MacBook I can carry around real easy. Now I have a smartphone. It's
Yep.
1999. Now I have a smartphone and iPhone. It's super easy to, hook company email up to it. So the assessment, like no one's pulling that thread and looking at what are the modern things that are going on? Why are they happening? And historically, because there's a ton of great educational based kind of practices out there that you and I always talk about that just need to be retrofitted for the modern variables that are being faced right now. Companies would be so much further ahead, and individuals would feel so much more autonomy to be decision makers and free thinkers and logical thinkers to apply solutions to what they're seeing. Because how many times have both of us heard too, entry level employees, frontline employees, and managers are like, yeah, that doesn't make a lot of sense, but that's the policy, so we got to go with it. I would do it this way, but we got to do it this way. Like that's what you want. You want people, that's where engagement occurs because they care
Well,
enough to say, let me figure out a solution to it. And if you can collectively spread that, that's how you get a good basis for camaraderie, and the outcomes that generate from that camaraderie are all measurable.
I agree. Well, and it kind of goes back to, and I hate and to be overly simplistic, but in a couple of podcasts ago, got on that topic of the concept of joy at work. I know that's kind of sounds like ridiculous. Who's joyful at work? But we've seen it. You and I have seen
Yeah.
it in some of the projects that we've worked on when people feel that, they have the opportunity to be creative, to be a solution point, et cetera. And I do think the point of all of this, and I think we're going to continue to pound on this, is that we've got to allow people at all levels, if we want to work with them, if we want to have an effective organization, whatever that is, nonprofit, public company, government agency, whatever, and we want the people to actually be engaged in the work, to be doing work because they think it's valuable, because I like who I do things with, I see the value it brings to my customer, whoever that might be. We've got to allow them to be thinkers. And if we bombard them and we just bury them under the noise of stuff,
Yeah.
and as leaders, that's up to us to figure out, right?
Right.
That's not
Agreed.
somebody else's problem. That's our job. And I think this is getting lost because there's too many of these leaders who are like, not my job. That's that my employees got to figure that out. And my say is what's happening is they're figuring it out by saying, adios, I'm going because I can't deal with this anymore. Anyway, uh,
Agreed.
and we could probably talk on this for hours, but again, let me turn it over to you because I feel like I've been babbling a lot. But if you were to kind of
Oh,
close
you
this out,
have.
what I have been babbling. All right, but I'll ask you to close it out for us. And what would you finish it with? What do you think the short sentence in our classic "Stop doing stupid stuff" way would be?
Just observe and recognize where it's happening. Just literally take a minute to stop and observe, make an observation. Are you in a meeting where people are reading out status, status updates, for example? And is there a way that that can be done offline? You review the status, like you go into Salesforce, like we were talking about, and then you go connect with that person, even if it's asynchronously within work hours, asynchronously, and just start asking questions rather than having to pull it into a structured meeting where everybody's still got more meetings because it's easy to have a Zoom meeting, set up and put on people's calendar. Again, we talk about the accessibility for the adoption. Well, it's really easy to see people's calendars and just drop meetings on their calendar. Oh, you have 5 minutes free right now, Tim, so I'm going to schedule that meeting. Think about all of that. Make those observations out there and journal it. I know everybody's probably journaled to death out of, but just make a note of saying, yeah, I'm seeing this. I'm seeing that this meeting is just people reading out status. That probably could be done differently or offline. And then we have a meeting that's shortened. So instead of it being an hour, it's only 30 minutes. And that 30 minutes is just us collaborating together and talking.
You know, as you say that, I'm thinking about what a cool AI tool to maybe help people prioritize the work that they're doing. Anyway, I know that people are developing that and all the rest of that, but I think to your point, it's got to be like pay attention. And we need to give people the authority to raise their hand and say, you know what, do we really need an hour meeting for this? Or could have this been an email? Um,
Yep. Or a
and
chat.
well, and
Or-
leaders need to be willing to listen to that feedback and not just be like, oh, I'm sorry, you're not smart enough to understand why we had to have this meeting. That which I've heard.
I like your sarcastic voice there, that the tone
Yeah.
variation. That was cool. But no, you're
Well,
right. I look at like the same way as, all right, well, hey, I got promoted to this executive role, 10 years ago, and you know what? We were in the office and we were in meetings, and let's go that. I work at home? No, 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 no more work at home. Let's go back to the office. I'm
by the way,
obviously
can we bring back,
simplifying that, but
yeah, can we do fax machines too while we're at it? Because I haven't used one of those in a long time.
I
Uh,
do have a desire to use a fax machine with the sole purpose, even though this is convoluted a bit, with the sole purpose of it jamming and me getting so upset about it, like Office Space's printer, right? And then we go out to the field and we get to film our own, Office Space
but
scene with cool music and all of that. That would be pretty ideal.
I like that. That would be a very good team building event. We get to smash old printers and fax machines. I think that a lot to be said for that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, with that, for those of you listening who haven't hung up already, this is another SDSS Stop Doing Stupid Stuff podcast. Please subscribe. Comments are more than welcome. We're continuing to expand on this. And as I like to end every speech, one more thing: stop doing stupid stuff.
Yep. Please stop doing stupid stuff. Shout out to Sophie. We'll make sure we tag her so you can check out her article in the posting as well. Really, really solid.
Excellent. Thanks again, guys.
Well, thanks everybody.